Hello, and welcome back to I Love. I am Podan. On today's episode, we will be discussing the 2016 web series Transformers Combiner Wars. We'll start this off with our movie roll call. Combiner Wars consisted of 4 prelude episodes and 8 standard episodes, with a combined runtime of roughly 60 minutes. The series aired from August 2nd to September 20th of 2016. Series was created by and written by Eric S. Calderon, George Kierstick, and F.J. DeSanto. The series was directed by Kenji Nakamura. Animation for the series was done by Tetsunaku Productions. The series was produced by Machinima Incorporated, Tetsunaku Productions, and Hasbro Studios. The series was distributed by Machinima Incorporated exclusively for Go90 streaming service, which was sadly shut down on July 31st of 2018, effectively making the series unwatchable on all services. But luckily, on March 9th of 2019, Rooster Teeth acquired streaming rights, so I will have a link in the description below for that, because they have the streaming rights of these series, the entire Prime Wars Trilogy, and they have the rights to make a very similar series that will be exclusively on Netflix later this year. Our main characters in the series consist of 3 exiles. We start with Windblade, the former city speaker, Optimus Prime, the former leader of the Autobots, and Megatron, the former leader of the Decepticons. We have the council members of Cybertron in this series, which consist of Rodimus Prime, Starscream, and the Mistress of Flame. The combiners that we have featured in this story are Victorion, Computron, Menasor, and Devastator. We also get a glimpse of the Ultimate Combiner in an unstable form, which that will become more important in the later shows. Our side characters that we will see in the story consist of Caminus Guard Maxima, who is a brand new character created for the series, and it is first time seeing her. A few Constructicons we see in the series consist of Scrapper, Long Haul, and Scavenger. We also get to see a couple of Titans for a few seconds. We see Metroplex, and at the very end, we see my favorite Titan, Fortress Maximus. To end our roll call, we will now go into our tagline and prelude of the series, which is thus. 40 years after the Great War between the Autobots and Decepticons on Earth, the 2 factions return to Cybertron, where Optimus Prime defeated Megatron in a final duel, ending their war permanently. A Council of Worlds was forged, consisting of Rodimus Prime, Starscream, and the Mistress of Flame, ruling Cybertron and Caminus in an uneasy peace. However, a violent rise of the Combiners is causing death and destruction on Caminus, while the Combiner Victorion searches for the enigma of combination. Oh yeah, that is awesome. It's a great setup, and that is literally the prelude and setup to the entire story, and we see a little bit of that and hear about it in the prelude episodes. So next, my quick and effective review of the series is, of course, I loved it. The Combiner Wars was an amazing series. It's animated awesomely with the whole toon-shaded look, so it looks like cartoons even though it's 3D animation. It is a great love letter to anybody who was missing the old thrill and adult killing of the Transformers that occurred in the 80s film. And of course, it continues the original storyline, which we have not technically seen in animation in a long time. Very long time. In the series, we see some fantastic battles between many characters, good and bad, because of course, the line of Decepticon and Autobot no longer exists. We have Transformers now, and we have problems with these Transformers, which is an amazing evolution to their story. So we are no longer in the middle of this huge war. It's actually just a crisis on their planet, which is, of course, the raging Combiners, which we really don't know why they're raging. We just figure it has something to do with the enigma of combination. So next, we will go into spoiler time. So if you haven't seen the series, get to it and watch it. Otherwise, you're going to be missing some stuff. My favorite parts of this series, let's start off with the battle right in the beginning of the story. The beginning of the story, Computron versus Menasor. This is personally a favorite scene of mine, of course, because Computron, as you can see here, is one of my favorite combiners. And this brought me right back to the 80s cartoon, seeing it for the very first time. If you remember, you sitting down and you're like, oh, all my favorite Transformers in this epic adventure. Can't wait to see what happens. 10 minutes in, they're all dead. And then you got to meet a bunch of new guys. But this occurs right here in the beginning for me with Computron. I'm like, hey, sweet Computron. He's in the series. It's the Combiner Wars. He's going to get his due. Oh, he gets ripped to pieces by Menasor. Oh, well. Let's take a quick look at that scene right here. Whew. Simply brutal. Gets his arm, leg ripped off, and of course his face smashed in by Menasor. I hate to love it, but it's so great. Who cares? Sorry, Computron. My next favorite scene is Devastator crashing the council party. Now, I love this scene because it shows Devastator's immense power, his anger, and brute force, because he is Devastator, and Devastator smash causes devastation. So he shows up right in the middle of their battle. The Exiles are fighting the council members for possession of the Enigma, and right in the middle of this, Devastator's like, screw all you guys, smash! And he crushes up, grabs Rodimus Prime, rips his arm off, throws him aside because he's a wuss, who cares, and boom. Let's take a quick look at that one.
No one has to die if we can...
Fantastic. And that was amazing power from Devastator. And of course, he don't give a shit about nobody. My last favorite scene is the ultimate team-up of Optimus Prime and Megatron, which of course is amazing. We have the strongest Autobot, the strongest Decepticon teaming up together. Finally, I've wanted to see it my whole life. I'm sure a few of you have too, to fight the abomination of Starscream trying to be the ultimate combiner. And this, of course, is amazing. We get to see Optimus and him team up. Megatron, we get to see his third form because he's always been a triple changer since the comics now. He has his gun form, his tank form, but on Cybertron, he's not a pistol. He is a Cybertronian blaster cannon, which is amazing to see this in action. Let's take a quick look now. Woohoo! Take that, Starscream. You're toast, bitch. So that is fantastic. I love that scene. It is great to see them together. And like I said, it's cool that the Autobots and Decepticons, at least in this storyline, it's kind of over. It's just Transformers living on Cybertron, trying to pick up the pieces of the million-year war that we have watched, stepped in and stepped out of watching for many years ourselves. So that is fantastic. Let's move on to my favorite lines. There are many favorite lines in this story. Many. Megatron says numerous funny things. I'll slam a couple extra in there at the end. But my favorite lines for the story is Megatron mocking Prime's 80s catchphrase. That is funny. And of course, what a callback to the cartoon itself when he tells him, "What'd you used to say? Transform and roll out?" So let's take a quick look at that, because that is hilarious.
What was that you always used to say, Prime? Oh, that's right. Transform and roll out.
Oh yeah, that's funny. And it shows their age, shows some humor, and it shows some character to these robots that are living machines. They are not just robots. So that is awesome to see in this story evolve. In a lot of the cartoons, we don't really see that. It's more like just them fighting and things. The movie, we got to see a lot of emotion, but this brings that all back. Next, we have Devastator. After he rips Rodimus Prime's arm off, he yells at Megatron. And I love this scene too, because it gives us some little backstory to Devastator and Megatron's past, and how they kind of feel towards each other, and why Devastator wasn't Devastator in the first place, which is awesome. Let's take a quick look at that scene right now.
You no longer give Devastator orders! How wrong you are. I am your master. Stand down. No! No more masters! You order us to rip ourselves apart so you feel safe!
That's awesome. I love that he just yells at them, and then he tells them that he's gonna, like, rip them apart. That's fantastic, because Devastator's a monster, and he thinks that everybody's afraid of him, but the leader class, Transformers, aren't afraid of nothing. Take that, Devastator. Lastly, I love when Starscream, before he becomes the Abomination, he has that crazed monologue when he is the ultimate combiner, and that is just fantastic. It's kind of a love letter to Starscream's entire character, and it also explains everything that he's been trying to do the whole time, because if you know Transformers as well as I do, Starscream has a very, very old past where he's kind of hated everybody forever, and he's always kind of just been trying to destroy or rule everything, and this is a culmination to that, finally. Let's take a quick look at that speech right here.
All those wasted years, fighting sanctimonious Autobots, fighting Decepticon madness, fighting to convince a frightened Empire to trust me. It was worth it.
That was awesome. And of course, right after that, he becomes the Abomination, because he can't handle the power, like Megatron always told him. Okay, next, let's go into our Easter eggs. There's not many, because the show is kind of what you get. It's very, it's sort of a prelude, if you were, to the other two movies of the series. I call them movies, because I feel that the episodes are a little short, and it's better to watch them as one big chunk. But anyways, let's get into those Easter eggs. I see Victorion herself as a great Easter egg right away. She's a character that they sold as a toy shortly before the series actually came out, but she is a fan-created character to add some female robots to the Transformer universe, which is awesome, and this is the first time we see her in a series. She is great, and she has a great backstory that we're going to touch on in just a minute. Next Easter egg, I believe, is an Easter egg. When we go and find Megatron with Optimus Prime and Windblade, they go to a specific location, which is a gladiatorial ring. And I believe that this is the remnants of Kaon, the Decepticon capital city, which would make a lot of sense. They don't, of course, say it, but it would make sense because it would touch on Megatron's old past, some of the cartoon stuff, because they say in the old war that they had their base in Kaon, which is their capital city or base of operations, but in the comic books of Megatron, they say that he was a gladiatorial fighter in the arenas of Kaon before the war started, and that is where he proved himself to be a leader, to become the leader of the Decepticons. So totally, I feel like, if they don't need to tell me, that is an Easter egg, that is Kaon, and that's why Megatron is hanging out there and having himself a blasty, beating up the Constructicons, which I love. It's funny scene. Next, a couple of small Easter eggs, of course, which lead us to the next series, which we will of course cover more when we get to that. But Metroplex is awakened for Titans Return, which is amazing. We see his big arm come up, and of course, when he awakens, you basically realize that the Council of Cybertron is old Autobot City, which is, of course, Metroplex. And that's where he's sleeping after he destroyed Trypticon, which we'll get into, of course, again in the next story. And at the very end, we see Fortress Maximus for a quick second. That is the face that is shown at the very end, and he is my favorite Titan. And we will, of course, see him in Titans Return, the next one. Next, we will get into our fun stuff, my fun stuff, things that I see in the show, and fun stuff that I would like to let people know, of course. First one, and I think the main one, I think is really neat about this. Most Transformers cartoons nowadays they create them and then they make toys, which is great, but there is something special about the original G1 in the fact that there was a comic book that was made by Marvel that the cartoon was based on, and the toys came from that, which is cool. You know, we had this whole cartoon from a comic book verse, so people were already reading a comic book and then got into the toys and the cartoon. And that is amazing because this storyline comes from, as you can see here, comic books as well. The IDW comic books of 2016 that were going on at that very time. So this is the first time since the 80s that the show itself and the toys have been made the exact way it was when I myself and a lot of you were kids. So that in itself makes the Prime Wars Trilogy an amazing addition to the Transformers franchise. Next fun fact is Victorion herself. They don't really touch on how she is created in the show. They just say that she is created by the Enigma of Combination, so I would like to explain that a little bit for you. And that is, she was originally a group of 6 Autobots known as the Torchbearers. And they were called Pyromagna, Jumpstream, Dust Up, Slide, Skyburst, and Rust Dust. They were a team of explorers who searched for Cybertronian artifacts, and at one point they were on a expedition in the Rust Sea to part on like the far side of Cybertron that we usually never see. And over there they found the Enigma of Combination. When they found it, they touched it, and Victorion was formed. Like, they were just friends. Originally, they were not supposed to be a combiner, and that is why she says in the beginning that she was born, not built. Because most of the combiners, I believe, the story is that they were built, they combined themselves to help fight the war. So that is a very interesting thing for everybody to know and understand about her. And I believe that this is also the reason why she does not transform back to her other forms ever, as she believes that she is like a religious prophet, if you would, and that is why she actually really believes in the Mistress of Flame, who is a kind of a priest, and always listens to her commands. Next, we have the Enigma combination. At the very end of the story, a neat thing with it is we see this become the calming of the combiners in a way, and that is done by, of course, Windblade. When she gets it, well, she gets reawakened by Metroplex after dying. She learns, I guess, from this experience that the Enigma of Combination is their matrix of leadership. So in a sense, when she gives it to Victorion, she absorbs it very much like the matrix of leadership for the Autobots. And then they all have, I guess, a leader, as the way that they try to set it up at the end there, because, spoiler, there's a little more to it, but at least in the end of this story, that's what calms the combiners, and then they go off, and now they'll listen to Victorion instead of going mad and doing crazy things, smashing cities and destroying everything in their path, which we see a couple of times in the show, when they're destroying the council, the city there, and of course in the very beginning when Caminus is being destroyed. And then final fun fact, to expand on this universe, of course the G1 universe, the comics, and now Transformers Combiner Wars and the Prime Wars Trilogy, they have deemed that Transformers Devastation, that really fun game, where it's all animated looking very much like this series, is part of this universe, and I see it taking place probably just in between the cartoons, comics, and now just an extra story inside there. And Transformers Earth Wars, the mobile game, which is a fun defending base game and collecting character game, which also fits itself right into this universe. Final thoughts on the Combiner Wars. Okay, the series did extremely good, and I think this is awesome to note, because when I first saw the series and heard about it back in 2016, it was just called Combiner Wars, and you've already heard me call it the Prime Wars Trilogy, which the show did so good that before the first series was done, they renamed it Combiner Wars, the Prime Wars Trilogy. So as if a part 1, 2, 3 films, as it were, which is amazing. And also, the second note, they did so good that they got original talent back, which I know some people get upset about it, but the voice acting in this series was impeccable. It was amazing. You could tell that they had a love for G1 and just wanted to sound as much like what they heard in their heads as well. So the voice acting in this series is fantastic for what we get, but in Titan's Return and Power of the Primes, we get some characters back from the original cartoon that we would not expect. Some we would, but it all awesome in the end. Can't wait to get to those episodes next. Final thought of this, in case you don't know which to watch or what to watch in which order, I thought I would explain that to get to Prime Wars Trilogy, if you don't want to just watch it, which of course you can, you would want to watch the original cartoon G1, Season 1 and 2, the film, the movie, of course, then you'd watch Season 3, and then if you're not going to watch the Japanese series, you can watch the last season, which is the 3 episodes called Rebirth, and then that just takes you right into Prime Wars Trilogy. But there are going to be some characters that show up that will confuse you, and you'll wonder where they are because they speak about them because they have interacted in the past. And that past is Headmasters and Super God Master Force. Now, if you want to watch that, I would strongly suggest it because there are some fantastic characters that show up from there next. You would watch the exact same order, but you would skip Season 4's Rebirth, replacing it with Headmasters, which then leads to Super God Master Force. And then, of course, the Prime Wars Trilogy. You might be asking about Transformers Victory. You do not need to watch Victory, as I'm pretty sure it takes place hundreds of years later, they say. And that means it's way past this, because they tell us right in the beginning that this show takes place 40 years after the Great War is ended. So we have a time frame, and that does not take place in this one. But I loved the Combiner Wars. I hoped you loved the Combiner Wars too. I would love to hear what you loved about the Combiner Wars in the comments below. Like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
Stars will bloom and die before I'm done killing you.
Megatron, you're not what I thought you were.
I have always been more than meets the eye. Don't bother me again. I prefer to be left alone.